The crisp morning air bit gently as Emily Carter steered her aging pickup truck along the winding mountain road. Pines towered on either side, their dark silhouettes barely lit by the rising sun. Dust trailed behind the battered vehicle as it pulled into the polished lot of the Rocky Mountain shooting range. Gleaming SUVs and spotless trucks lined up like trophies. Emily's muddy truck stood awkwardly among them. Stepping out, she adjusted her worn olive jacket and slung the weathered leather rifle case over her shoulder. Heads turned. The unassuming woman in faded jeans and work boots had just entered their world. Emily walked steadily toward the towering clubhouse, the crisp mountain air swirling around her. The glass-paneled entrance reflected rows of championship plaques, mounted game heads, and portraits of men posing proudly with their precision rifles. Inside, the warm wood and stone decor was met with glances and raised eyebrows. Her worn jeans, scuffed boots, and classic leather rifle case stood in sharp contrast to the logo-covered performance gear and carbon fiber gun cases that filled the room. At the registration desk, she calmly handed over her ID and signed the necessary forms. The attendant barely concealed his skepticism, watching her with a flicker of doubt as she clipped her day pass to her jacket. Stepping out onto the range, she navigated past expensive polished firearms resting on custom benches. Conversations hushed as Emily made her way to the long-range section. Her old Winchester Model 70 drew lingering looks and faint smirks. Clustered groups of men whispered as they watched her set up. They eyed her basic backpack leather shooting mat and the aged rifle she laid out with care. Unfazed, Emily methodically prepared unfolding the mat, aligning her scope, and recording the weather conditions in her worn notebook. The test was only beginning. The wind shifted slightly across the open range as Emily settled onto her shooting mat at the farthest station. To her right, sleek rifles with oversized scopes rested in gleaming mounts. The men who owned them stood confidently, occasionally glancing her way with thin smiles of disbelief. Emily ignored them. Her focus remained on the familiar feel of the rifle in her hands. She opened her worn leather ammo pouch, inspecting each hand-loaded round with meticulous care before slipping them into the holder. The faint sound of laughter drifted toward her as she adjusted the spotting scope and checked wind flags fluttering along the distance markers. Calm and deliberate, she recorded the data in her notebook: temperature, humidity, wind speed. One by one, the men returned to their stations, still exchanging amused glances. A few positioned their phones to discreetly capture what they expected would be a quick failure. Emily remained composed, executing her pre-shot routine. Her breathing slowed, her posture aligned perfectly with decades of disciplined practice. The weight of silent judgment hung thick in the cool mountain air. As she loaded the first round, the distant steel target shimmered in the sun. The stage was set. The challenge loomed just ahead. The sun climbed higher, casting sharp shadows along the manicured firing lanes. Emily adjusted her scope, her steady hands betraying none of the tension radiating from the gathering crowd. A loose semicircle of men had formed behind her firing station, shifting eagerly, whispering among themselves. Some balanced against their expensive bipods, others leaned on glossy gun cases, grinning as they watched her every move. Beyond the range markers, the steel gong at 600 yards hung motionless against the backdrop of pines and rocky outcrops. It was a small, defiant circle barely visible to the untrained eye, a nearly impossible shot even for the most seasoned marksman. Emily blocked out the muffled sounds of scoffs and murmured bets. Her breathing remained slow and rhythmic as she checked the flags once more, noting the subtle breeze sliding across the range. She carefully slid a single round into the chamber, closed the bolt with precision, and rested her cheek against the smooth, worn stock. The world around her seemed to narrow to a tunnel, just her, the rifle, and the distant target. A phone lifted into the air as someone prepared to record what they assumed would be a spectacular failure. Others shook their heads, already preparing their excuses and jokes for when she missed. Emily's finger rested lightly on the trigger as she exhaled, stabilizing her heartbeat, allowing years of training and repetition to guide her. Calculations raced silently through her mind. Elevation, wind drift, bullet drop. The crosshairs settled just off-center to compensate for the breeze. Time stretched the entire range, holding its collective breath. Without hesitation, she squeezed the trigger. The crack of the shot shattered the stillness, the rifle's recoil absorbed effortlessly by her practiced frame. Silence fell again, awaiting the verdict. The shot echoed across the range, sharp and clean, before fading into stunned stillness. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then a clear, unmistakable metallic ping drifted back from the distant hillside. A perfect hit. The sound sliced through the lingering doubt like a blade through silk. Emily calmly cycled the bolt, ejecting the spent casing onto the mat beside her. Around her mouths hung open, sunglasses lowered, and smug expressions dissolved into disbelief. Phones that had been held high now lowered slowly, their owners frozen mid-recording. Without any outward reaction, Emily methodically chambered another round. Again, she settled into her practiced rhythm. Crack. Ping. Another flawless strike. She repeated the sequence, mechanical and precise. A third shot, a fourth, a fifth. Each time the sharp report was followed by the sweet confirmation of lead meeting steel. In less than 3 minutes, 5 consecutive hits had transformed the atmosphere. Murmurs replaced laughter. Skeptical frowns shifted to wide-eyed respect. The men exchanged glances, silent and uneasy as their assumptions crumbled. Emily sat back, wiped down her rifle with a clean cloth, and recorded the shot data into her weathered notebook as if nothing extraordinary had occurred. The steel gong, still swinging gently in the distance, stood as witness to her mastery. The men stood motionless, struggling to process what they had just witnessed. The easy arrogance that had colored their earlier expressions had vanished, replaced by reluctant admiration and genuine curiosity. Slowly, one by one, they stepped forward, gesturing respectfully toward the woman who had so effortlessly outshot them. Emily rose from her mat with quiet confidence, her movements calm and deliberate, as she began disassembling and cleaning her rifle. The weathered leather case awaited nearby, familiar and unassuming amid the sleek, high-tech gear around her. The crowd lingered, hesitant but eager, shifting from small clusters to a loose semicircle once again, not to mock but to learn. A few offered nods of acknowledgement. Others glanced at each other silently, debating whether to approach. Eventually, some did, drawn by the gravity of skill they could not deny. Emily showed them her methods with the same quiet discipline she had used on the firing line. Breathing patterns, body alignment, wind adjustments, and trigger control. Even those who had been the loudest doubters now listened intently, their pride slowly giving way to genuine respect. The steel gong in the distance no longer symbolized an impossible challenge, but a benchmark they now aspired to reach. The golden light of late afternoon spilled across the rugged peaks as Emily packed the last of her gear into the back of her dust-covered pickup. The once watchful crowd had dispersed, leaving behind only the distant echo of the day's lessons and the soft clinking of metal swinging in the breeze. Emily paused for a moment, leaning against the truck bed, gazing back at the range where hours earlier she had stood alone, outnumbered and underestimated. Now the landscape seemed different. The mountains, unchanging and eternal, stood as silent witnesses to what had quietly unfolded, a reminder that strength is often found in the most unassuming forms. Sliding behind the wheel, Emily guided the old truck onto the winding road. The tires kicked up soft plumes of dust that twisted and danced in the amber light. With the familiar weight of her grandfather's rifle resting securely in its case beside her, she wound her way down the mountain pass. As the horizon stretched open before her, Emily felt no need for celebration or validation. The shot had spoken for her. In that moment, she carried more than just a legacy of precision. She carried the quiet certainty of someone who knew exactly who they were.